This is a very creepy or scary story about picking up two hitchhikers around 1975. I was with one of my best friends from college, both of us in our early 20s, who may still know and who can verify what happened. He and I were both living, work and going to school in the Atlanta area at the time, then decided to take a long weekend trip down to Florida, planning on going down the Gulf Coast a bit, but not quite as far as Tampa. We were trundling on the I-75 in my 1967 VW Squareback, with me doing all the driving. At some point, we saw two young hitchhikers, a male and female, and started to pick them up. They said they were on the way to Florida, and somewhere in upstate New York, maybe around Poughkeepsie. The ride began very uneventfully, with us making a bit of small talk with them, but eventually them in the back and us in the front, engaged on our own conversations, all just silent reflection. It began to get dark. I could see the outline of their heads and shoulders in my rearview mirror. Then, at some point, I noticed they seemed to be arguing, even though they were keeping their voices fairly quiet but definitely not shouting. Even a VW Squareback was a small car, and it's impossible to hide what's going on in such close quarters. I felt it was incredibly rude for a guest to be arguing in someone else's car, for I just tried to ignore her. At some point, I noticed in the rearview mirror that he appeared to be raising his fist. I could also feel that there appeared to be some jostling around or pushing or struggling. That alarmed me, but I didn't say anything. Before long, we had to stop for gas and a bathroom break. I pulled into a small truck shop type of place and filled a tank. Then I pulled into a parking area and we all got out of the car to go inside and use facilities. My friend went with the young man into the men's restroom and I went with the girl into the women's restroom. I should interject here that this was the first time I really got a good look at them, under the lights of the store. I realized that they were both younger than I had originally estimated, which I took to be 18 to 20 years old. Upon closer inspection, it seemed that the gal was maybe 14 or 15 and the guy 16 or 17. Basically, they were minors. So, immediately after we entered the women's room, the girl took me by the arm. And here's a Cliff Notes version of how the conversation went. "Girl, you has to help me." Me, a mind as quick trying to run through what likely types of help she needed from me. "Sure, let's go it on." "You has to help me get away from that guy." My mind continued trying to process the situation. "Okay, tell me about it." He and I were both in a facility for teenagers. In minor trouble with the law? Some sort of residential detention center, a halfway house, or repo? He told me he had a brother with a farm nearby, upstate New York, and we could go there. So we ran away. It turns out that his brother didn't live there, but he took me to some random farm and raked me in the barn. But brain starts to explode. Then he told me that his brother was actually in Florida and that we should go there. So that's what we're doing. I don't believe he has a brother in Florida either. I don't want to be with him, and I want to go back. I told him that. And that's what we were arguing about. Explains the arguing I had earlier. He found me that if I spoke corporal or said anything to you, that he would kill you. Clarification, she says that he threatened to hurt me, the obvious source of transportation at the moment, who she tried to alert me that she needed help. "Okay, stay right here and don't leave the bathroom until you hear from me. I'll figure out what to do." I walked out of the women's room and saw my friend and the teenage boy just hanging out waiting for us. I went up to my friend and pulled him aside so the boy couldn't hear me. "Listen, don't ask any questions. Just go out to the car and get all of your belongings and just hang out somewhere and wait until you hear back from me." The reason I told him to get his belongings out of the car is that I figured that he might have some got packed away. I didn't want to risk a search of our car and covering anything illegal in the event that the cops got involved in what was about to come down. I didn't know if he were dealing with a potential kidnapping at the most, or runaway teens at the least, but I knew that something bad was going on. When I gave my friend these instructions, he naturally looked totally confused, but he did what I asked. In the meantime, the teenage boy was just hanging out against the wall. I wondered about him, worried that he would get suspicious about what was going on, and act as some sort of rash or violent manner. Well, he just continued to hunt out against the wall. Then, I quickly surveyed the rest of the situation. I saw that there was a hostess/cashier at the podium in the restaurant part of the truck shop. I calmly walked up to speak to her. Nay, to the hostess. Don't look over that way now, for there was a teenage boy standing over against a wall. He's traveling with a younger girl who's now in the women's room. Girl told me that the boy forces to travel with him, and they're runaways from some sort of residential facility in New York. She does not want to be with him. They both appear to be minors, and I need some help. Okay, it just so happens that there are some Georgia State troopers eating in the restaurant right now, over in the corner. I think she go talk to them about this. And then casually looked around and spotted the troopers. I calmly walked over to their table and sat down with them. I quickly introduced myself and explained the basic details of the situation. I verified the location and identity of a teenage boy and told him that the girl's in the ladies' room and what she looked like. I made zero mention of the friend who was traveling with me. Trooper, do you have anything in your call? Worried, since I thought we might. Did we have any contraband in the car, and my fears of having the car searched and getting dragged into a complicated legal situation might ensue? What do you mean? Do you have any of the possessions of the two kids in your car? Oh, no, they didn't leave anything at the car. Okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to get up and walk to the door. When you get there, don't stop. Don't talk to the boy or anyone else. Just leave, get a new car, and take off. So I stood up and did as he told me. The troopers fell into position, my cover guarding me on all sides as we walked to the door. As we neared the boy, he did seem a bit confused as he saw me walking with the troopers on all sides of me. But he just continued to stand there. As I left the building, I saw my friend standing outside off to the side with his possessions. I told him not to ask any questions, but to just get in the car with me and we would leave. Which is what he did. I then explained to him everything that had happened with me and the girl, and the whole thing, something that he would, of course, have known nothing about, other than when I told him to get his shit out of my car and just lay low until I told him otherwise. I have no idea what happened after I left. I'm assuming that the troopers took the two teens into custody and tried to sort out what was going on. I was really surprised at the time that the troopers just wanted me to leave and not to hang around to get more info from me or look at my identification or the like. Just leading was fired by May. I knew that, for sure, I did not want my friend to get involved or possibly get into trouble for possessing some weed. I never know the whole story at Cross. I believe that the girl was probably most telling me the truth. That they were runaways. He was too young and too frightened for it to be otherwise. Plus, what she told me basically meshed with what I'd observed, the arguing, him raising a fist, etc. Whether or not the boy would actually have harmed me, if she'd cried out or spoken up, who knows? I don't know of the past about them being from the juvenile detention center or group home or whatever, which is the truth. He started in 2014, and it happened in my home country of Sweden, when I went to an art school for summer course as a form of daily activity. The people at Bazaar School were some of the worst people I have ever met, and mine included me, because I was kind of trashed by then too. I was 21 years old, and I had very little experience of the real world. I'd gone 2 extra years of school because of switching majors and taking an extra year got my second choice, so I was literally on my first year of independence. I also have a light form of autism and didn't receive schooling until I was 12, which made me a bit more slowly developed mentally during high school, but I'm all caught up now. Basically, I have a 21-year-old with very little life experience. The people we met at the art school were not, let's say, the highest of the cheerers. Though some of the meanest and most terrible people I've ever met. They treated each other awfully, as well as its inches. But I was quite belittled too. In fact, I felt like being around these people made me worse. Well, started the stalking with an incident involving a cracked paint. I was going to be thrown away, so Silvers took away some of the paint so it wouldn't go to waste, and I finally took the remaining paint. When it's over showed up, her name was Anna, and this is how she introduced herself. My art teacher was pushing these big tables on a trolley through the narrow passageway of the art hall, and Anna, dressed in expensive design clothes, stuttered away. Shall I all teacher, not fearing anything, screams, "Move it!" Anna snaps towards her with his crazy-looking eyes and shouts, "Excuse me, do you know who I am? I'm a famous woman." My art teacher, not impressed, responded with, "Okay, famous woman, move it." That was how we learned of Anna, the famous artist. She then proceeded to have all the terrible people of my class schmooze over her and treat her like a celebrity. Her real reason for being there was because of her paint. So the great hunt began. I was roped into it, but my initial plan was to just give her back her pain so she could be off. Except during the hunt I got these terrifying word flags. She kept sniffing the paint of other people to see if it was furrows. Apparently she had pulled some kind of oil into the paint so she could sniff her way to where they were. During the hunt, she admitted that she had been put to treatment for the criminally insane because she had stalked a previous schoolmate that she thought had stolen paint from her. She even showed a CCTV video of her old schoolmate pulling a suitcase behind her, saying that's where she had the paint that she stole. I asked her how she got the video, and she said the head dad has connections with local government, but she'd gotten no video from one of the local government cameras, which is illegal for a layman to get access to. During this time, she even showed me the court document which she had saved as a PDF on her phone. During this time, she also admitted that I had been sending messages to a famous artist in Orebron because her voice from heaven told her to do it, and that he was destined to help her with a career. I also thought that staring wide-eyed made her more attractive, like the kind of stare where you can't see any of the eyelids at all. So while she was saying all this, she had this crazy-eyed look on her face. I was terrified of her and couldn't figure out a way of handing back the paint, so she ended up threatening to have the principal fired if she couldn't search every room for the paint. And when she did find all of the paint, she put it in one of the school's rooms and said that she would pick it up when she wanted to. She said that she would come every year during the art exhibit to check if her paint was still there, and that she would sue the school if she found it missing. What a crazy fashion. End the story, right? Alarwis. About 2 years later, I enrolled at a 1-year basic art program at the school. I'd completely forgotten about this crazy person. At one point, we were cleaning out the art rooms, and her paint was brought up again, and it would again be thrown away. Me, not remembering that crazy famous artist, took a nice crimson bottle for myself, while others took some of the not ruined color, opened to go by their foe out themselves. That as we all tried to continue with our lives, the crazy lady one day returned and started sniffing all the core. I didn't recognize her at all, and had forgotten how dangerously deranged she was. I'd even forgotten I'd gotten the crimson color from the paint. So when she started interrogating me for why the paint smelled like hers, I didn't know what to say. She also smelled her pates at some other girl's table and was harassing her as well. Taking that this was all more fuss than it was worth, I threw away the crimson paint. They'd started to cop from aid anyway. And that's when everything went to hell and crazy-eyed Anna became my stalker. When she found out I had thrown away the paint, she became convinced that I had re-enrolled at the art school, specifically to steal her paint. She started convincing a bunch of gullible and, to be honest, low-achieving people, but this was true, and I started being harassed. It started with a physical attack. I was painting alone in the evening, minding my own business, with this huge brute ran into me, tackled me to the floor, and hit and kicked me. While this was happening, crazy-eyed Ada was fake crying in the corner. But I could see on the floor, Asha went from fake crying into gleefully smiling as I was being kicked and hit. Another guest she had recruited ticked up and slashed my phone, breaking it. As the guy stoned off and the second girl followed, I stumbled onto my feet and asked Anna why she had done this, and the answer she gave me made me realize what kind of person she was. "So you know that I can hit you, if I want." That's what she turned it. I later asked the brute why he had attacked me, and he said that he hated people who stole. This guy is trading nuts for Conan teacher. I fear for those children. I bruised my ribs, but they were not allowed to go to the hospital because the principal didn't want to get involved. And since my phone was broken, I couldn't call for an ambulance. So it took so long to get to the hospital, and the outside signs that the abuse had healed. During this time, crazy-eyed Anna started wearing a crimson jacket wherever she went. I asked her why she was wearing it, and also said she looked pretty, thinking that talking nicely to her would start a friendly conversation, so I'd be smooth everything over. Well, Anna was not like normal people and does not think like normal people. Her response was that she wanted me to think of her every time I saw this color, and said that she'd seen her work in a movie. She then uttered, "I am more beautiful than you will ever be." Wherever she went, she had a horde of schmees around her, all thinking she was some kind of famous and fancy artist. But eventually, she had to leave school, and I thought I had peace. Except she one day suddenly showed up, and gleefully presented me with the school's Russian exchange student. The student had been sitting at my table every day for weeks, and I hadn't paid any mind because, why would I? She was allowed to sit there. But this is when crazy-eyed Anna drops the bombshell that this exchange student was A, not a real exchange student, and B, she'd been putting her phone on the table each mealtime while having it on speaker, with Anna on the other end, silently listening in on my conversations. And I know when she first told me this, how I didn't believe it. And unbelief in a part of me still had a hard time realizing the lengths this woman was going to were real. But it was what she said next that terrified me the most. She said, "I know about the secret messages behind your words. I know what you're up to. And I heard a voice from above that told me that this is my mission in life, to keep an eye on you. Just make sure you behave." The abuse at school escalated after this. I was harassed and cornered in every classroom and chased around school. At the same time, I got no help. It escalated into a happening one late weekend night. I was sitting in the school's texter room when a guy suddenly burst in and started running towards me screaming, "What makes you think you can sit here?" He didn't urge the school. I jumped out of a window and started running towards my dorm and managed to call 112 in the meantime. He made it on the for Sweden and managed to scream out that I needed help from where I was. I ran towards my dorm, but another guy was waiting there for me, so I ran towards the head building. A third guy was waiting there. They cornered me, and I remember thinking how scared I was. And Buzz, I was gonna die. But then, a light of hope. Blue and red lights from the road. I was saved. Remember how happy I was to see the police officer. Everything would finally be over. Berlin. He walked up to the gal who orchestrated all of it, Malin, and he greeted her like a friend. And I knew at that moment that he wouldn't save me. I screamed for help. He ignored me. She told him that there was no issue here. Shedding with looking forward to seeing her around town. Funny left. He left me. He just drove away. The last thing I remember is the fake lights of that police car driving away. I wake up the next morning, laying on the ground with a huge bump on the side of my head. I don't know what happened. Malin claims they never touched me and I just passed out when one of the guys grabbed me. I know better. I know the pain I felt and the huge bump on the side of my head. I called 112 and I called for an ambulance. At this time, because of the abuse, I had memory loss and couldn't quite tell the lady what the issue was. But I made a mistake. I told her that I had called 112 the day after and that a police officer just left me. And she got mad. Really, really mad. She timed with I was slandering her co-worker and to only call if I actually needed help. And that she hung up. I was alone again. With no one. Not a single person on my side. I tried to make a police report against Anna and Marlon, but the officer had heard about me and deleted my report. It had during this time that I'd had enough and thought about ending my own life, chose forcefully put in a mental health ward. And the stalking didn't stop. Crazy-eyed Anna had a friend of hers be committed so she could come into the ward as a visitor in order to harass me. When I tried to go to our school again, she had people she had threatened to join the same program so they could keep an eye on me. Aho! She would have another guy she had threatened to paw outside my house a few times a week in order to scare me. During this, she would also have things stolen from me, like shoes, gloves and the like. And according to the people doing the stealing, this was because she'd watched a movie where someone steals items and then puts them back to make someone go insane from the harassment. Crazy-eyed Anna would call me a few times a year and lying about being a data collector to get private information off me, something that took a few years to even catch on to. Because she lived in a big city far away at the time, she constantly forced others to do the stalking for her. Most of them had at one point given drugs to and then would get them to do what she wanted by threatening to report them to police if they wouldn't. Unless he just bribed with money or charmed. I've gone for hour-long bus rides where someone admits to being there for her assent. Most people are afraid of her because she won't leave them alone, then she would do to them what she does for me if they don't say yes. One girl was roped into standing all dressed in red outside my supermarket. Another girl was also roped into sitting with her car outside my house for hours a few days a week. One because of the fear of this violent. I learned from a cousin of hers that she affords all of this because she won an art prize for $500,000 SEK at one point. It's why she thinks she's famous. I also learned that most of her biological family has cut contact with her because she's been doing this since she was a teenager. And yet, even with that information, no one would listen. Would I tell people what she had done to me, people call me crazy. I've no history of delusions or of making up telltales, yet it was so much easier for people to just think that I was crazy. I've even been forcefully medicated at some points with psychosis medication. The baffled doctors lamented over not working. Not even my family believes me, something that is forever barred and was trust I can point to the relationship between us. I asked her once why she was doing all of this, and she said, to punish you. I asked her for how long I would need to be punished, and she answered, for as long as I want. At one point, I even considered killing her. I'm the kind of person who catches flies alive in a cup and let them out the window. I've never harmed another human being. I've never been violent. Guess at one point felt so desperate for freedom that I would take prison rather than being haunted by crazy-eyed Anna anymore. I was more afraid of her than of prison. And then, it stopped. It just stopped. Still a year later, I don't know why. Nothing in her history tells me why she would stop willingly. So I'm convinced that either she's run out of people to threaten into doing her bidding, or something has happened to her. I saw that one of these people finally reported her and actually got taken seriously. I don't know. Even so, I can't feel relief. Not yet. I've still afraid it will start to go, and I've given up all hope of being taken seriously by the police. Anne, like not leaps. Years ago, we were remodeling our kitchen after a small fire. It was a complete kitchen redo, with the addition of some additional living space. I was in my late 30s at the time. It was Gary in his end 20s doing some brickwork. I didn't have much contact with him, but somehow we both discovered that we were from the same hometown. Really, that was all we had in common, and we only talked a little about it a few times. Oh, I almost forgot this part. He mentioned to me that he had been in some trouble with the law or some clients. He claimed it didn't affect fight, but really it was self-defense, and he ended up with a criminal record which he considered to be unfair. It is grey. One day, na phone on. This was the days when everyone had it landline. He was the guy calling and asking for me. Hollered even at my number, but he did. I was curious why he was calling and figured it had something to do with the work. But now he just wanted to have a chat. I really had nothing to say to him, so I've politely cut the conversation short. As I recall, he cut me one more time with the same result. I clearly told him I had to hang up. 2 days later, he was at the house doing some work, outside on the brick. I was in the kitchen area cleaning up. At that point, the kitchen was just an empty room with no cabinets or appliances in it. From where he was working, he could see me inside through a big window in the breakfast nook. Fast forward an hour or so, and I was on the back deck doing something. He came up to me, and this is how the conversation went. Him: "Hey, a lot of guys saw you work in the kitchen there. Of Jay, and you'll tray hot." I left right away to go inside and get away from them. I know it's all the husband what happened, because anywhere frick about. I did call the main guy, I'd guess he'd call my contractor, and told him that I didn't want the brick guy there anymore, unless someone else was there to oversee him. Contractor asked what has happened, and Kenny guessed that the brick guy had been inappropriate. I didn't go into a detail, but just if they had been calling me on the phone, and they'd made remarks to me in person that made me uncomfortable. I never saw the brick guy again, but for a while, I was kind of fearful they would come back to the house, since he knew the layout, and that I was home alone with small children during the day. When I was about 20, around the early 1970s, I was hitchhiking from a family home in western New York State. It's where I went to college in south central the state. The route was not on interstate highways, but rather on state highways roads. At some point, a trucker picked me up. The ride was fairly uneventful until we were going along, and as we approached Ithaca, he said something about how the crew at where he was supposed to drop off his shipment would be on their lunch break for an hour, starting at 12, and wouldn't be back until 1 p.m. He said that since it was 12:30, we'd have to pull off the road and wait for a while before going into town. I looked at my watch, which showed the time to be 11:30, which meant there was no reason for us not to proceed into town before the lunch break, a half hour in the future. I corrected him about the time, but he insisted that my watch was wrong. I was sure that it wasn't, but he wouldn't listen. So there we were, in the middle of pretty much nowhere in central New York State, on a 2-lane state highway surrounded by woods. He pulled over to the side of the road and parked. Just gray. To say that it was awkward would be an understatement. Note, I was a typical-looking young college student of the day. I had the natural beauty of youth, a cute figure, beautiful long blonde, straight hair, and was undoubtedly wearing blue jeans or some sort of t-shirt, the uniform of their youth at the time, and since then. I was presumably carrying a purse, maybe a duffel bag containing a few possessions. The gallantry, but I didn't have any serious money on me. If I had a lost family, I wouldn't have been hitching. So, back to the roadside stop. We exchanged some neutral comments. I was mostly looking out the side window, thinking to myself that A, there was not a lot of traffic passing by in either direction, and B, if I had to jump out of the cab, I had nowhere to run, but downside of the sparsely traveled road, or into the woods. Then he says, "You know, you have beautiful hair." Oh my God, my blood pressure must have skyrocketed. I choked out a meek, "Thank you." I went back to looking out the window and considering my options. Next comment, "If you're tired, you can climb back into the bug carrier and rest if you like." Chill me now, I politely declined. "Would you mind if you held up your hand?" No, seriously, kill me now. I cannot believe I held it together enough to calmly respond that no, I wasn't comfortable with that. So, the rest of the time passed by until it was almost 1 p.m. by his calculation, but really 12 o'clock by my watch. Wouldn't say too much. As you all can imagine, I was frightened out of my mind. I cannot believe I hadn't burst into tears after the pure stress of the situation. Then, he finally said it was time to head into town. As we approached Ithaca, he said that he would have to drop me off at the edge of town since he wasn't allowed to have people in a truck with him. He went on to say that if I wanted to ride the rest of the way, I could wait for him while he would drop off his load and he'd pick me up when he finished. I mumbled some word of thanks and said I would think about it. I got out of the truck and then, fearing he would come back and find me, but to hide out somewhere for a few hours until I was confident that he would have presumed that I'd gone on my way. Then I stuck up my thumb, found a ride for the rest of the way to where I was going. By the way, I checked my watch against the local time. My watch was correct. Just as I suspected, he'd been lying about what time it was.